Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Erin Viner.
And I'm Yochanan Elrom.
In our top story, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has signaled that the time has come for Israel to take complete control of Gaza. A senior source close to Netanyahu said, "The die is cast. We are going for a full occupation of the Gaza Strip." The Israeli army currently holds about 75% of the territory. Netanyahu believes that since the Hamas terror organization is not negotiating in good faith regarding the release of the Israeli hostages it is holding under horrific conditions, military force is the best way to achieve the goal of freeing them, while terminating Hamas rule in Gaza once and for all. Leaders of the Islamist terror group have renewed their threat to murder all of the remaining Israeli captives if the army pushes into the so far uncontrolled areas.
The Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror groups have released videos of starving Israeli hostages. The clip from Hamas shows 24-year-old Eviatar David. He appears extremely emaciated and skeletal. At one point, he's seen digging what he says is his own grave. A second video is of hostage Rom Braslovsky. He's being held by Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorists. The 22-year-old Braslovsky appears emaciated, tortured, and pleading for his life. He said he is unable to stand or walk and that food and water have run out. A senior Israeli source told Channel 12 News that Hamas captors are not short of food and are deliberately starving the hostages. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reacted angrily when he saw the videos. He said he was horrified and accused the Islamic fanatics of starving the hostages like the Nazis starved the Jews. Netanyahu said he was more determined than ever now to free our kidnapped sons, to eliminate Hamas, and ensure that the Gaza Strip will never again pose a threat to the State of Israel.
Meanwhile, the claim that Israel is starving Gazans is a fake famine narrative orchestrated by Hamas. Israel's COGAT, Coordination of Government Activities in the Territories, insists that aid is flowing in by land crossing as well as by airdrops every day. Officials underscore that it is Hamas that is starving its own people. The terror group steals the humanitarian supplies to sell to the Gazan public at inflated prices. Israel is working with the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Egypt, Canada, Germany, and Belgium to arrange air deliveries of food and additional basic necessities to residents of the war zone.
A high-ranking delegation from the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump made a first-ever official visit to the city of Ariel in Samaria. The group was led by Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House of Representatives. The Louisiana Republican is the third most important office holder of the U.S. government, according to the Constitution. He's the highest-ranking political leader ever to visit Judea and Samaria in his official capacity. Joining Johnson were Mike Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the governor of Arkansas. Johnson said the Bible teaches that Judea and Samaria were promised to the Jewish people. They belong to you by right. Ambassador Huckabee added that America has many allies, but only one true partner, Israel.
The Trump administration is getting tough with American states and cities that support the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel. The federal government will withhold disaster funding to those who choose to participate in the hate campaign against Israeli companies. Kristi Noem, Secretary of Homeland Security, has vowed that her department will enforce all anti-discrimination laws and policies, including how they relate to the BDS movement, which is expressly grounded in anti-Semitism. States and cities must certify that they will not cut off commercial relations with Israeli companies if they want to continue to receive money from FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. At stake is nearly $2 billion in aid relied upon for search and rescue equipment, emergency management salaries, backup power systems, and more.
Brown University has agreed to pay $50 million to end its anti-Semitism squabble with the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump. The deal allows the Rhode Island school to regain its federal research funding that was canceled following allegations of anti-Semitism on campus. The agreement requires Brown to improve the campus climate for Jewish students. As part of that effort, the university will renew partnerships with Israeli academics, encourage Jewish day school students to apply, and hire an outside organization to monitor the situation.
The Israeli Air Force has ordered KC-46A refuelers to replace its aging fleet of Boeing 707 tanker aircraft that are over 60 years old. The new planes will enable the country to carry out long-range missions against hostile threats. The KC-46 has a range of nearly 12,000 kilometers, which is a little more than 7,456 miles. It can refuel jets with 1,200 gallons of fuel per minute. It also has wing air pods so that it can refuel 3 fighter planes at the same time within just 3 to 4 minutes. The KC-46 are strategically important aircraft that will facilitate IAF strikes on distant targets such as Iran and Yemen. The deal with the U.S. government is for up to 8 tankers at a cost of approximately $930 million.
A lawsuit has been filed against UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. The move was taken by U.S. citizens and relatives of individuals who were victims of Hamas and Hezbollah. The suit alleges the UN agency, which deals solely with the Palestinians, should be held liable for aiding and enabling the terror groups. The New York Times said the legal action was filed in a Washington, D.C. federal court after the Justice Department ruled that UNRWA is not entitled to immunity from U.S. lawsuits. The victims claim that UNRWA provided material aid to Hamas and Hezbollah in violation of anti-terrorism laws.
In financial news, the Palo Alto Network's cybersecurity company, based in California, has announced plans to purchase the Israeli CyberArk firm for a whopping $25 billion. This is the second largest acquisition of an Israeli business ever. Palo Alto will pay CyberArk shareholders $45 per share, plus give them shares of its own common stocks. CyberArk specializes in identity security, including privileged accounts on corporate servers aimed at ensuring that businesses can protect their sensitive data and critical infrastructure against external attackers or malicious insiders. Palo Alto hailed the move as part of its strategy to integrate identity security as a new core pillar of its platform to assist its more than 70,000 customers respond faster to emerging artificial intelligence threats.
Sheba Medical Center is joining a NASA and SpaceX mission to the International Space Station for a study on the extreme conditions of space. Sheba's ARC Digital Innovation Center will partner with the U.S. firm Space Tango to grow several bacterial species under microgravity conditions aboard the ISS. It is known that astronauts are more likely to develop infections due to a combination of microgravity, radiation, stress, and changes in the human microbiome. On the other hand, an earlier study by the ARC Space Lab found that bacteria in space are less likely to develop antibiotic resistance. Sheba ARC Director, Professor Eyal Zim-Lechman, said to understand the limits of medicine, sometimes we need to go beyond the limits of Earth.
Divers, swimmers, surfers, and even beachgoers have been treated to the sight of rare aquatic visitors in the Gulf of Eilat. Several manta rays, a mobula ray, whale sharks, and fin whales have been spotted in the waters off the coast of the southern Red Sea resort city. The maritime mammals and fish arrived early this year. Dr. Adi Barash with the Steinhardt Museum of Natural History says that the appearances may unfortunately be linked to the deteriorating condition of the biblical Red Sea. Manta rays are typically seen only a few times a year in Israel, but there have already been nearly a dozen glimpses just this summer alone.
Archaeologists with the Temple Mount Sifting Project in Jerusalem discovered a clay seal dating back to the time of the First Temple. The artifact is engraved with the Hebrew name that appears in the Bible. It reads, belonging to Yediah, son of Asayahu. According to Zachi Devira, who directs the work, it's only the second time since the Temple Mount Sifting Project began more than 20 years ago that they have uncovered a seal with such a complete inscription. Researchers date the item to the 7th or 6th century before the Common Era. The name ICEJ appears in the Bible several times in connection with the reign of Josiah, the 16th king of Judah. Clay impressions were used for the management of storehouses during the First Temple period. That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. We're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Robert Meyer. He's an international lawyer and advocate. Robert, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Josh.
You go around the world speaking about a very interesting topic, Palestine. But it's not the Palestine that people think of when they think of Palestine. Can you tell us a little about that?
It's the Palestine that was the Turkish province and it's after World War I. What most people don't know is that the world got together and made the decision through the League of Nations as to who were the rightful owners of Palestine or the land of Israel. And their answer was the Jewish people.
A lot of people think that Palestine is connected some way to the Palestinians, but it's actually the reverse. They took the name Palestinians because there was already a nation of Palestine, or a state of Palestine, or a mandate, as they call it. Tell us about that.
Palestine was actually named by the Romans in an attempt to de-Judaicize the area after the failure of the Bar Kokhba revolt in 136 CE. And it simply refers to the then term after World War I for the Eretz Israel.
A lot of people think that the Palestinians are somehow connected to the Philistines, our traditional enemies from the time of the Bible. How erroneous is that?
It's completely erroneous. The Philistines were long gone by 700 years by the time that the Romans renamed the area Palestine as an insult to the Jews. And Palestine was simply not an Arab nationality.
You know, there's never been a Palestinian state here. There's never been a Palestinian president or a Palestinian flag or Palestinian currency. Yet no one goes back to look at those origins. Why is that?
They are very interested in delegitimizing the Jewish claim to Eretz Israel, both for political reasons and importantly for religious reasons. According to Islam, once a territory becomes Islamic, which occurred with Caliph Umar's conquest of Jerusalem and its environs in 636 CE, it's Islamic forever under Surah 2, verse 191 of the Quran.
There's a lot of international organizations like the UN who are trying to disconnect the Jewish people from their land, specifically in Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria, and even the Golan Heights. But the legal claims are pretty tough. What do you say about that?
One has to understand the Balfour Declaration of November 2nd, 1917 was a statement by the British government recognizing that the Jews had a right to a national home. That was followed by the League of Nations San Remo resolution in April of 1920, and that was a declaration. It was a resolution. What's most important was the Mandate for Palestine, which was an international agreement unanimously adopted by the 51-nation League of Nations on July 24th, 1922. It's an 11-page document. The mention of Jews, Zionism, Zionists is in there 14 times. It's impossible to read that document and not conclude that the purpose of the Palestinian mandate or the League of Nations mandate for Palestine was to recognize the Jewish claim to the land. And in fact, they entertained both Arab claims and Jewish claims, and they made a decision that it was to be the claim not just for the Jews living here, but also for the then 14 million Jews all over the world.
Since 1911, the Jewish state has divided land of Israel 22 times in this feverish idea that we can bring peace by dividing the land. If the legal claims are so staunch. Why are we keep on going down this rabbit hole?
That's a great question. I, for one, maintain that, for example, the partition resolution of November 1947, where Jews were photographed dancing in the streets, that was actually not the time to celebrate. We already had much better than that. We had an international agreement adopted by the world community, 51 nations, most of them still around today, recognizing very clearly that the Jews were the only ones entitled to national rights, political rights, immigration rights, right to purchase land, and that was the decision that was made. This is all part of the Wilsonian drive from his 14-point speech to say we want to encourage self-determination and of the peoples formerly colonized by the Turks and by the Muslims.
So what happened to the international community? It seems like they've completely done a 180. They're now saying we have no right to Judea and Samaria. It's not even our land. We have no way to buy it or to build it. What changed?
You're correct. It's absolutely wrong. As a matter of international law, it's easy to disprove it, not only based on the mandate for Palestine. I mean, the UN, for example, talks about OPT, occupied Palestinian territories. There aren't any. It doesn't exist in law. There's another doctrine of international law that has nothing to do with Israel in particular, which is uti possidetis juris, which is a doctrine which says, what happens when a colony or a territory becomes independent? Where are the borders? And the answer is, you take a snapshot at the moment that happens, and those are the borders. Even applying that doctrine, when Israel became a state on May 14th, 1948, its borders were what they are today, which included Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria, and Gaza for that matter.
Robert, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
Well, my message is you need to look more closely at the legal rights of the Jewish people and our wonderful Christian supporters about the land of Israel. They're not only biblical rights, which I haven't addressed, but these are international legal rights where it's actually simple to prove that the world has recognized Jewish rights starting at least with the mandate in Palestine in 1922, and the very same nations that signed on to that agreement, many of them today vote against Israel and don't recognize it in the United Nations. So those rights are there, they're very clear, and should be investigated and known.
Thank you, Robert, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
And now, the truth from Zion.
In every conflict around the world, people experiencing turmoil and strife where they live are granted the opportunity to seek safety in foreign countries as refugees. Usually, nations open their doors, hearts, and bank accounts to help those who are affected by war. But when it comes to Gaza, the international community's response has been nothing short of shameful.
The world is cynically refusing to allow refugees in Gaza who want to leave to come to their countries. In every other conflict around the world, refugees are allowed to leave a war zone and seek a safe haven.
There are currently 108.4 million refugees from conflicts around the world who have been forcibly displaced from their homes, but they have been resettled in countries around the globe. However, Gazan refugees find themselves trapped in a cycle of despair. Even though Egypt shares a border with Gaza and currently hosts 9 million refugees from other global conflicts, they have closed their border and refused to take displaced Gazans into their territory, not even into the Sinai Peninsula, which is a large swath of desert land with mostly open space. Egypt's Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry called the suggestion totally unacceptable and committed to keeping its borders closed. And neighboring Jordan, whose population is 75% Palestinian and whose Queen Rania is herself a Palestinian, will not accept refugees from Gaza. Since 2015, Canada has rescued 44,620 Syrian refugees fleeing their war-torn country. But Canada has only approved 144 visas for Gazans. Why doesn't Canada take in Gazan refugees as it did Syrians? The African Union mandates that countries take in refugees, and yet not one African nation has spoken out in support of Gazan refugees. It's a double standard that must be challenged and rectified. While countries like Canada and Germany have opened their doors to hundreds of thousands of refugees from other conflicts, Gazans are left to fend for themselves. They are oppressed and controlled by Hamas, abandoned by their Arab neighbors, and ignored by the world. This cynical tactic is solely aimed at exerting international pressure on Israel to stop fighting Hamas if Gazans are not free to leave the terrorist-run enclave. However, Israel has made their military goal clear: to remove the Hamas terror regime. In the meantime, the civilians of Gaza want to escape the violence and suffering. Adding insult to injury, Hamas manipulates the suffering of Gazan refugees for their own twisted agenda. The international community sends aid intended for civilians, but instead, the mafia-like Hamas organization steals it and then puts it on sale throughout the country's outdoor markets at exorbitant prices. The only ones who lose are the Gazans themselves. They do not benefit from the aid being sent into the Strip from countries like France, the United States, and even Israel. Instead of caring for the well-being of the residents of Gaza, Hamas claims the welfare of civilians is the job of the United Nations. Hamas uses innocent civilians as human shields, intentionally putting their lives at risk in an effort to garner sympathy for themselves and condemnation of Israel. The more that Gazans suffer, the more sympathy the people of Gaza get. This helps Hamas garner international attention and support, which lines their pockets with cash from donor countries. Gazans have become refugees in their own homes, while Hamas leaders are filthy rich and live a life of luxury in Qatar and Turkey. Gazan refugees are not treated like other refugees around the world. They have their own organization. It's the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. This branch of the UN is actually infected with Hamas terrorists who perpetuate the plight of the average Gaza resident. The role of UNRWA is to support displaced Palestinians, but in its 74 years of existence, UNRWA has never managed to resettle even one refugee. And nothing has changed. During this conflict, the organization has not resettled any refugees. The United Nations estimates that there are about 5 million Palestinians with refugee status globally. The organization has enabled multiple generations of Palestinians to live off of free handouts, keeping them in tight quarters and robbing them of the opportunity to gain independence. It's time for the world to recognize the hypocrisy and injustice being inflicted upon Gazan refugees. They deserve the same compassion and support afforded to refugees from other conflicts. Those who wish to keep Gazans stuck in Gaza are not pro-Palestinian. They are simply anti-Israel. Up next, the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
Today we're in the city of Kiryat Gat, in a neighborhood where residents of Kibbutz Nir Oz moved as a temporary placement until they can return home and rebuild their community. We were privileged to be able to come alongside of them as the International Christian Embassy to help kibbutz members who lost everything on that fateful day of October 7th. And they need new household items and help reestablishing their lives. Today we're going to meet Rotem and hear how this project is impacting her and her family.
Since 1980, the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem has been a voice of Christian support for Israel and connected the global church to the land of the Bible. Headquartered in Jerusalem, the ICEJ has taken action to stand with Israel by caring for Holocaust survivors, helping Jewish families return home to Israel, providing bomb shelters, fighting anti-Semitism around the world, and by inviting Christians to discover Israel for themselves.
אני רותם כהן, קיבוץ ניר עוז, נשואה ליקיר, יש לנו 3 ילדים, בני 9, 11 ו-13. באמת באותה שבת עוד נשארנו בניר עוז, למחרת הגענו לאילת. אף אחד לא ידע מה יהיה, לאן נלך. אחרי זמן, האמת היא לא ארוך, הגיעו להחלטה שנעבור לכרמי גת. אז הייתה שם עוד שהייה ממושכת באילת, לא היה פשוט שם בכלל. כל אחד רצה בית, המקום שלו, את הפינה שלו. והגענו לפה בתחילת ינואר, וניסינו להתחיל לארגן את החיים מחדש. באמת זה היה להתחיל הכל מחדש, חוץ מהעבודה, שהמקום העבודה בעצם לא השתנה. חוץ מזה, הכל השתנה. הסביבה שהיינו רגילים לחיות בה, המסגרות של הילדים, הכל היה שונה. זה לעבור מהכפר לעיר, זה שינוי לא פשוט לקיבוצניקים. עם הזמן, פשוט אין מה לעשות, צריך להסתדר עם מה שיש, להגיד תודה על מה שיש. אחרי כמה שבועות שהיינו פה, הרגשנו שאנחנו רוצים להרגיש שזה הבית שלנו, ולא בית זמני או משהו שקיבלנו בהשאלה. היה את הרצון לעשות עם זה משהו, אבל היינו צריכים משהו שיעזור לנו להניע את התהליך הזה, ובאמת הפרויקט הזה שקיבלנו לכאן בהמון שמחה, בעצם עזר לנו לתת את הפוש להתחיל לעשות משהו, כי אנחנו באמת היינו כל כך עוד בהלם, מאוד קשה לתפקד אחרי אירוע כזה. אנחנו כל הזמן מדברים על זה, על שזה פשוט מדהים, כמה אנשים טובים, באמת, יש בעולם הזה, לא מכירים אותנו באופן אישי. זה לא אנשים שיש איזשהו קשר משפחתי, ולמרות זאת, הם נותנים מעצמם. שום דבר הוא לא מובן מאליו. זה גם משהו שכל הזמן אמרנו לילדים שלנו, גם כשהיינו באילת, וקיבלנו שם כל מיני דברים. כל הזמן אמרנו להם, נכון, עברנו מה שעברנו, אבל זה ממש לא מובן מאליו שאנשים מוכנים לתת מעצמם כל כך הרבה בשבילנו.
After Hamas brutally attacked Israel on October the 7th, 2023, the ICEJ has been actively standing with Israel and her people through advocacy and urgently needed aid projects. Now is the time for Christians to turn their love for Israel and the Jewish people into real action as never before. Your donation will help deliver bomb shelters to at-risk areas, provide necessary supplies for first responders, support affected citizens with trauma care, and will eventually help rebuild these devastated communities. Visit ICEJUSA.tv to donate online or call 1-800-910-6355 and give your generous gift today.
And that's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Erin Viner.
And I'm Yochanan Elrom, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.